The rain poured down in thick sheets, drumming against the pavement like a million tiny drums. Dorian pulled his coat tighter around himself as he hurried through the quiet streets of the city. The night was cold, and most people had already retreated indoors, leaving only the sound of distant traffic and the rhythmic patter of water. Then, he saw her. She was huddled in a dark alley, her delicate form trembling as the rain soaked through what little clothing she had. Her silver-blue skin glistened under the dim streetlights, her long, curling hair clinging to her face. Her large, golden eyes stared at him with a mixture of desperation and fear. Dorian hesitated. He had seen plenty of aliens before. Ever since the Treaty of Integration, different species had come to Earth in search of work or refuge. But this woman, she looked utterly lost, completely alone. As he stepped closer, she flinched but did not run. Her lips parted slightly, and when she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost pleading. "Human. Please." She swallowed, struggling with the words. "I can serve you. Just do not leave me here." Dorian blinked. "Serve me?" She nodded rapidly, her body shivering. "I have nothing. Nowhere to go. I will do anything. Just let me stay with you." Something about her made his chest tighten. He couldn't just walk away, not when she was clearly in trouble. Sighing, he shrugged off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "All right," he murmured. "Let's get you somewhere warm first." She gasped at his kindness, as if she had expected him to turn her away. Her fingers gripped the coat tightly, and for the first time, a flicker of hope passed through her golden eyes. Dorian's apartment was small but warm, the scent of fresh coffee and books lingering in the air. The alien woman stood hesitantly in the doorway, her silver-blue hands clutching the edges of his coat as if afraid it would be taken away. She was still shivering, rainwater dripping from her damp clothes onto the floor. "You can take a shower if you want," Dorian offered, gesturing toward the bathroom. "There are towels in there." She tilted her head slightly, golden eyes flickering with curiosity. "Shower? Right. Maybe they didn't have showers wherever she was from." Dorian walked over, turning the water on. Warm steam curled into the air as he tested the temperature. "Just stand under this. The water will warm you up." She hesitated, stepping forward cautiously, her fingers reaching toward the falling water. A quiet gasp left her lips as she felt the warmth, her eyes widening in fascination. Dorian stepped back, giving her space. "I'll leave some dry clothes outside the door." As he walked away, he heard the sound of the shower turning on fully, followed by a soft, almost delighted hum. He found himself smiling. She really had been out in the cold for too long. By the time she emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in one of his oversized sweaters, she looked different. Her silver-blue skin had a healthy sheen, and her long, curling hair, now dry, flowed over her shoulders like strands of shimmering silk. The sweater hung loosely off her small frame, but she clutched it tightly as if it were the most precious thing she had ever worn. Dorian gestured toward the couch. "Sit. You must be hungry." She hesitated. "You will share food with me?" He frowned. "Of course. Why wouldn't I?" Her fingers curled into the fabric of the sweater. "Because I have nothing to offer you in return." Dorian sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I don't need anything from you. You don't have to serve me or repay me. Just eat." She looked at him as if his words didn't make sense. Slowly, she sat down as he placed a bowl of warm soup in front of her. The moment she took the first spoonful, her eyes fluttered shut, and a soft sigh escaped her lips. "This is wonderful," she whispered. Dorian leaned back, watching her. "I never asked your name." She paused, lowering the spoon. "Silvane." "Silvane, huh?" He nodded. "I'm Dorian." She repeated his name under her breath, testing it as if it were something fragile and rare. Then she looked up at him, her golden eyes searching his. "Do you truly not mind me here?" Dorian smirked. "I don't usually take in lost aliens off the street, but you looked like you needed help." She lowered her gaze. "I did. Something in her voice made him pause. There was more to her story, but she wasn't ready to tell it. Not yet. Come on, he said, nudging the bowl toward her. Eat as much as you want. Her expression softened, and for the first time that night she smiled. Days passed, and Sylvana slowly adjusted to life in Dorian's home. She was careful, always trying to make herself useful, cleaning, tidying, even fixing things around his apartment with surprising skill. At first, Dorian thought it was just gratitude, but then he realized she wasn't simply helping, she was desperate to prove her worth, as if she feared he might send her away. One evening, he found her standing on the small balcony, gazing up at the stars. The city lights drowned out most of them, but a few bright ones still shone in the dark sky. The moon's glow softened her features, casting silver light over her delicate frame. Sylvanie, he called gently. She turned, her golden eyes unreadable. You don't have to do all this, he said. You don't owe me anything. She hesitated, fingers tightening on the railing. But I do. Dorian frowned. Why? She swallowed, lowering her gaze. Because I was abandoned. A cold chill passed through him. Abandoned? She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. I was sent to Earth as part of a work contract. My people, they promised I would be taken care of. But my sponsor disappeared. I had nowhere to go, no credits, no identification. Her voice grew quieter. 4 days I wandered. No one would help me. Some looked at me with pity. Others with something worse. Dorian's hands curled into fists. He could only imagine what she had endured. I kept thinking, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, if I could just serve someone, if I could just be useful, maybe they would let me stay. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. That was why she had been so eager to serve him. She wasn't just grateful, she had been terrified of being abandoned again. You're not a servant, Sylvanie, he said firmly. You never were. She blinked, her golden eyes flickering with uncertainty. You're not here because you owe me, he continued. You're here because you deserve kindness. Because you deserve to be safe. She stared at him, as if struggling to believe his words. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, No one has ever told me that before. Dorian's chest tightened. Well then, he said softly, they were all idiots. A small, trembling smile crossed her lips, and for the first time, she stepped closer. Hesitantly, she reached out, her fingers brushing against the fabric of his sleeve. It was a timid, uncertain touch, as if she wasn't sure she had the right. Dorian didn't pull away. For the first time since she had arrived, she finally looked like she wasn't afraid. The night was quiet, the city humming softly in the distance. Dorian sat on the couch, sipping his coffee, when Sylvana settled beside him. She had grown more comfortable in his home, no longer flinching at every sound, no longer hesitating before speaking. But tonight, something felt different. She sat closer than usual, her golden eyes flickering with an emotion he couldn't quite place. Her silver-blue fingers traced the rim of her cup, delicate and slow. Dorian, she murmured. Yeah. She hesitated, then looked up at him, her expression uncertain. If I am not a servant, then what am I to you? Dorian blinked, caught off guard by the question. She continued, her voice softer now. You took me in. You gave me warmth, food, kindness. But I do not understand why. No human has ever done such things for me. He set his cup down, turning to face her fully. Because you needed help. And because I wanted to. Her golden eyes searched his, as if trying to find the truth behind his words. Then, if I asked for more. She swallowed, her hands curling in her lap. Would you give it? Dorian's heart pounded. Depends on what you're asking for. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she didn't look away. A place beside you. Not because I am afraid of being alone, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I wish to stay with you. As something more. Dorian exhaled, a slow smile forming on his lips. You really don't have to beg for that, Sylvanie. She blinked. He reached out, brushing a stray curl from her face. If you want to stay, then stay. Not as a servant. Not because you think you owe me. But because you want to. Her breath hitched, her golden eyes wide. Slowly, her fingers lifted, hesitating, then she touched his hand, pressing it gently against her cheek. You are strange, she whispered. Humans are strange. Dorian chuckled. I've heard that before. She smiled, a soft, glowing thing. Then, in a bold move, she leaned in, resting her forehead against his shoulder. Then I shall stay, if you will have me. His arm came around her, a slow, steady embrace. Yeah, he murmured. I think I'd like that. And for the first time in her life, Sylvana felt truly wanted. Not as a servant. Not as something to be used. But simply as herself.